we got up to here. We're still on Ayin Zayin Amud Bet. So we talked about this idea of walking through water on Yom Kippur for various reasons, either to go and greet your Rebbe or your parents or someone who is greater than you, or to guard your fruits, guard your belongings in another place, and so forth. And and then we had like a bit of a side thing about that when you walk through the water, you're not allowed to lift up your garment to carry it through the water. And that, I think that's more or less where we really left off. And then I think we just started to read the next part. So this is what we're going to go to. So based on the previous part, we understand that one is allowed to walk through water on Yom Kippur for any of these purposes that we just mentioned, even up to one's neck, right? So presumably up to one's neck and not more than one's neck, because you're not allowed to swim. That's I wanted to bring that up. Okay, I'll bring that up in a second. There's a Mishnah in Beitzah that talks about that. And so for here, you're not allowed to go up to you're allowed to go up to your neck, let's say. So on this, Matkif la Rav Yosef. So Yosef attacks this, and he says, "V'chol ki hai gavna mishare." Is this permitted in this way on chol? Is what permitted in this way on chol?
Walking through water.
Walking through water up to your neck.
Walking through water up to your neck. Is walking through water up to your neck permitted even on chol? The haktiv, and here it's written in Yechezkel, Vayamad elef b'ama, v'avirenu b'mayim me'afasim. So he measured 1,000 amma, and he passed me through the water, lower water down to, water that was to my ankles. And Rav Yosef comments, Mikan shemutar lavor ad afsayin. So this tells you you're allowed to go through water until your ankles. Vayamad elef, vayivirenu b'mayim birkayim. Then he measured 1,000, and he took me through the water to my berech, to my knees. Mikan shemutar. So this tells you you're allowed to go through water until your knees. And then he measured 1,000, and he brought me through the water to my waist. This tells you you're allowed to go through water up to the waist. From here and on, the pasuk says, Nachal. So he measured 1,000, a nachal, a wadi that I could not pass through. So what's that talking about? Did you look at Yechezkel? You did.
Yeah, I did, and he's leaving the Beit HaMikdash and going out via passing a stream and going to different depths, and he's only allowed to go to a certain depth,
right?
Certain length, which corresponds to a depth.
Right. So this passage is quite fascinating. We could really spend quite a long time on it. I think I read a little bit of it last time. Let's read a little bit of it again. The reason I want to look at it, obviously for two reasons. One is to understand the Sugya and the Gemara as we see it. but also to understand its significance more generally. So this part of Yechezkel is coming after Yechezkel has already been shown a vision of what we understand to be the third temple, and it starts off like this in Perek Nimtzayim Pasuk Aleph, Vayishiveni el petach habayit. So he brings me back to the opening of the house, and with the opening of the Beit HaMikdash. V'hine mayim yotzim mitachad miftan habayit kadima. So here is water. In here, water is coming out of the lintel of the house eastward. Pnei habayit kadim, because the front of the Beit HaMikdash is toward the east, as we know. It's the same way we understand it now. B'mayim yordim mitachat, and the water is going down from below. Miketef habayit hayimanit, from the right shoulder of the house. Minegev lamizbeach, south of the mizbeach. So, Michael Werner.
No. Yes.
Would you like to read? Maybe it'll help.
Yes, but I suspect that I'm going to need to. Yeah, I'll see what I can do. Where are we?
Well, do you,
I was actually out. I was completely out cold, so I have no idea where we are.
okay.
I'm sorry.
No,
I think that maybe it'd be better for me just to catch the recording. I'm sorry.
if you're too tired, I understand.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Whatever
Okay.
suits you.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. Okay, all right. All right, in any event, he took me out of the northern gate and he brought me around toward the outside, El Shara Hafutz, to the outward gate, Derech HaPoneh Kadim, to the way that turns eastward, V'hinei mayim mefakim min hakatef hayamanit. And here, water is trickling out of the right shoulder, the right being the south shoulder. V'tzeit ha'ish kadim v'kav biyado, and then as the man is coming out, essentially this malach who's guiding him, and he has a measure in his hand. Vayamad elef ba'ama v'yavireinu b'mayim me'af sayin. So he measures 1,000 amot, and he brings me through the water. And these are me'af sayin. So this is the water up to the ankles. Vayamad elef v'yavireinu b'mayim mayim birkayim v'yamad elef v'yavireinu me'matnayim. So these are psukim that the Gemara just quoted. Vayamad elef nachal asher lo uchal lavor. So he measures 1,000. It's a nachal, like a wadi that I cannot pass through. Ki ga'u hamayim me sachu nachal asher lo ye'aver. So the water has grown to me sachu, to a nachal that cannot be passed through. So what's Mesahu? So this was interesting. I was looking into the linguistics of this. So of course, Sahu, the root is what we are familiar with in also modern Hebrew, like lischot, is to swim. So you might say that this is swimming water, meaning in this context, water that you would have to swim through. You could no longer walk through this water. So asher lo ye'aver, but it cannot be passed through. So one way of understanding that would be in the context of what we're learning, that you can't just walk through it. The only way you could get through it would be by swimming. So there are a lot of questions, of course, that come up here. So like, what's the significance of this water? And this is not the only place where we have a vision of water coming out of the temple. We also have the vision in Zechariah, which the Gemara alludes to later. So what's the significance of that? We're going to set that aside for a moment and just understand it in terms of the pshat. But so one of the things that's interesting, at least to me, what does the Gemara want to prove from these psukim that's relevant? What does Rav Yosef want to prove from here that's relevant to our discussion?
In this case, you're not allowed to walk above loins. That's the farthest he was able to walk. After that, it says lo yaver.
Right. So it's interesting because the language is because the water has increased to like swimming waters, let's say. And nachal asher lo ye'aver. It's a nachal that cannot be passed through. It's a passive form. How do they do it? A river that could not be passed through. So what does Rav Yosef want to, what does he want to get from this? What does he want? What is he proving? That you can't, that you're not allowed to go through water that would go this far. So what is this far? So the stage before is Admot Naim. It's up to his loins, up to his waist. But then from there on, that I could not pass through. I could not pass through. So what's his proof? He's trying to prove that one is not allowed ever to go through water that would be really above your waist. How does he prove it from here? Like, what exactly is the proof?
Yehezkel is told explicitly not to go beyond his waist. So you certainly can't go up to your neck at any time.
So, okay, so what's interesting is the way the pasuk is presented. He said, I couldn't pass through it. He wasn't told that he wasn't allowed to pass through it. He just said, I couldn't pass through it because the water was such, I'll paraphrase, that it could not be passed through. So he's not actually told that he's not allowed to pass through it. He just says, I couldn't pass through it. So what Rav Yosef wants to derive from that one is, he derives from that one is not allowed to pass through such waters. It's not, I'm pointing out, it's not a direct isur. It's saying that something you can't do. So if it's something that you can't do, that would imply that you're not allowed to do it because of the danger. In other words, what does it mean you can't do it? You can't do it because maybe you'll drown. Maybe you'll drown and die. You're not allowed to put yourself in that kind of danger. So I don't know. I find the whole thing very interesting because it's all based on a vision of Yechezkel. It's something that Yechezkel sees in a vision. He doesn't actually experience it physically, but it reflects a certain physical reality, presumably. I don't know. I've been thinking about this now for the last couple of months since I've come across this, and I just find the whole proof to be fascinating because, like I say, it doesn't say that you're not allowed to go up to your neck. It just implies that once the water is higher than your waist, it may be impassable. So here's the thing. Where Rav Yosef is bringing this in the context of the sugya where right before that, the Gemara says, wait, not the Gemara. Where right before that, the Gemara says that you could really go up to your neck. So the Gemara, like people in the Gemara, right? Tanya de Messiah, Shomre Peroto Vrinat Savaran B'mayim V'en Chosheshin. The Braita says you go up to your neck and you don't worry. You don't have to worry, meaning you don't have to worry about being over rechitza on Yom Kippur. In that context, when we bring it earlier, we're saying you're allowed to go up to your neck. And what was our concern? Our concern is that we have this idea that you shouldn't get wet on Yom Kippur unless there's some necessity involved in getting wet, because you'll be over on Rechitza. And the Braita says, though, but nonetheless, that we allow people who are Shomrei Perot to go through water even up to their neck. And we're not worried about them being over on Rechitza. The Braita isn't concerned about the person's safety by virtue of the fact that the Braita is not concerned about the person's safety. It means that that wasn't an issue. The idea was simply, yeah, you could even go that high. And that maybe the reason the Braita says up to the neck is because you're not allowed to go higher than neck, because, as we said earlier, because maybe that's a safety concern. So now Rav Yosef brings this proof against it based on these psukim in Yechezkel, which are based on it, a vision of Yechezkel that just have to do they don't have to do with Rechitza and Yom Kippur, they just have to do with going through water, that really you're not allowed to go through water essentially above your waist. Apparently above your waist, you shouldn't go through water as Beseder, like that, so don't do that. But it's funny. It just seems to me like it's a funny kind of proof to bring from there, because it doesn't say you're not allowed to go up to your neck. It just says that in the instance of what happened to Yechezkel in his vision, that once the waters became a nachal and they were apparently above his waist, they became impassable. Anyway, the Gemara kind of pushes it away, as you know, because you've read ahead. Amar Abaye, the Abaye says, "Shiny nachal."
Sorry, can you switch the screens?
Oh, sorry. 1 second. Amar Abaye, "Shiny nachal duradife maya." So Abaye says, so he's saying to Rav Yosef, who was his Rebbe, he says a nachal is different because the water is rushing, right? In Yechezkel, this water that's coming out 1,000 amot at a time, and every 1,000 amot it gets deeper, which would make sense just geographically, in the sense that, right, the temple is on Har HaBayit, so it's literally on a mountain. As you go out of the temple, the elevation decreases. If the water stays at roughly the same height, it's going to continually get deeper. This is how I understand it. So Marabai shiny nachal duradife mais is a nachal is different because the water is rushing. So what is he saying? The nachal is different. It's different than what?
Different than the water that they're discussing in terms of Yom Kippur, if people could cross to check their fruit.
Right. the water that we're talking about to cross to check their fruit, or the other examples we gave of going to a shiur, etc. There, the heter was based on the idea that it wasn't rushing water. So you could walk through it and it wouldn't be dangerous, is the implication. But a nachal is rushing water, and that's the kind of body of water that Yechezkel was describing. So, Yachol Yavirenu b'sichui ki Talmud lomar ki ga'u hamayim mei sachu. Could be that you could go through it b'sichui. So sichui seemed to mean either floating or swimming. I spent a while going back and forth on this because sometimes we get off, like sometimes we don't understand things correctly because of our understanding of modern Hebrew. Sometimes that will sway us one way or the other. But here I'll show you this. I should have brought it up. I should have prepared it before, but you'll forgive me. I'll just take a second. You've probably learned the Mishnah in Beitzah. So let's look. It's in the last chapter of Beitzah. And 1 second, I'll share the screen. Okay, you see the screen. Mishnah Beitzah. So here, this is Mishnah Beitzah Perek Hey, Mishnah Bet. Kol shechayavin alav mishum shvut, mishum reshut, mishum mitzvah, b'Shabbat chayavin alav b'Yom Tov. So anything for which one is chayav that is based on an iser of shvut or reshut or mitzvah, you're also chayav for it on Yom Tov. So what does that mean? So let's take a second look at the Bartanura. Anything that the Chachamim said you're not allowed to do on Shabbat because of Shvut. It falls under the category of Shvut. O Mishum Reshut. So what's Reshut? Reshut means something permissible. Sheyesh bo k'tzat mitzvah, but it's something that has some mitzvah aspect to it. Of a lo mitzvah gdola, not a big mitzvah. Karov hu liyot dvar hareshut, and it's closer, it's akin to something that's simply permissible, or let's say optional. Right? We contrast reshut and mitzvah. Something is a reshut, it means it's optional. Mitzvah means it's something that you have to do. V'yesh lo isur midivrei sofrim, but there is an isur midivrei sofrim that's attached to it. O mishum mitzvah, or sheish bo mitzvah mamash, or even something that has a mitzvah attached to it. V'asru chachamim lasoto b'Shabbat. Nonetheless, chachamim said you're not allowed to do it on Shabbat. If you're not allowed, these categories of shvut, reshut, mitzvah, that chachamim were oser on Shabbat, they were also oser on Yom Tov. Right? Chayavin alav shelo lasoto b'Yom Tov. So now the Mishnah tells us in detail, in greater detail, what these things are. Ve'elohein mishum shvut. These are things that Chachamim forbade under the category of shvut, like to be shovet on Shabbat and on Yom Tov. Lo ulim ba'ilan, v'lo rochvin al gabei behema, v'lo shatin al pnei hamayim. Right, so you're not allowed to go up a tree. You're not allowed to climb trees on Shabbos. You're not allowed to ride on the back of an animal on Shabbos. You're not allowed to be shot al pnei hamayim on Shabbos, on Yom Tov. V'lo metapchim, v'lo mesapkin. Those are things that you do. Those are like. Those are things that are actions that you do in Avelut, like to to hit yourself or clap or to dance, things like that. So why aren't you allowed to do these things? Elohen mishum shvut, shitilu alav chachamim lishbot mehen, ve'en ba'asiyatan shum mitzvah. So these are things that you're supposed to refrain from doing on Shabbos and Yom Tov, and there's no mitzvah attached to them. So lo lin be'ilan, why aren't you allowed to go up in a tree? Gzera shena yitlosh. You're not allowed to go up in a tree because A, there's no mitzvah in going up, and B, we're afraid that if you go up, you'll tear off a twig or a branch or something, and that's asur midioraita. Lo rochvin al gabei behema, gzera shena yachtok zmora lahanhiga. You're not allowed to ride on an animal because we're afraid you're going to whip off a twig or a small branch to use as a whip to hit the animal in order to guide it, right, to conduct it. Lo shatin al pnei hamayim. Why? Gzer shema yaseh chavit shel shayatin. It's a gzera that you might make a barrel of floaters. In other words, either this means it's a kind of a raft, basically, but it sounds like, and it's mentioned elsewhere. It's mentioned in Masechet Kelim. It would be like, they didn't have rubbery things to blow up, but you could take, let's say, you could take a clay vessel and seal it up, and it would float. And you could use that to float on. And so there's a fear that maybe you're going to make something like that on Shabbos or Yom Tov, and that would be the Isur. So, right, v'lo metapchin means you don't clap, kaf al kaf. Lo mesapkin means you don't clap with your hand to your thigh. V'lo meraktin beregel, you don't dance with your foot. All of them you're not allowed to do because of Gzeirah. Maybe you will make some kind of a cliche. Maybe in order to, to keep the beat or whatever, to add to the musicality of what you're doing, that you'll somehow either make or just you'll fix a musical instrument to use along with this dancing or clapping. So we don't have to go through the rest of them, although they're all interesting. But so here, v'lo shatin al pnei hamayim. So what does it mean? I didn't know if I looked here what the way they. Yeah, so here they just translated as swim. You're not allowed to swim on water. Lashut, as we'll see. See, this word lashut is an interesting word. So it could mean, like I say, could mean to swim. It can also mean just to, the word just left my head. Lashut could also sort of mean to wander around. When you're talking about lashut al pnei hamayim, so it sounds like, what would that be? That would be something like if you're wandering around in water, it means like you're swimming or you're floating. That's what it would mean. Let's go back to the Gemara for a second, because you see, this is the point in the Gemara. The Gemara is trying to nail down the precise meaning. Oh, sorry. Okay. So shiny nachot. So it could be, that you could go through it, let's say with sichui, with swimming or floating. It could be that you could go through what with swimming? What are we talking, what are we talking about here?
To go through the water,
To go through which water?
the not the Nachal, the one for collecting your fruits or relevant to Yom Tov.
Actually, it's the Nachal. In other words, actually, no, it's okay. So in other words, Amarabai shiny Nachal Duradife Mai. Right. So Rav Yosef brought the psukim from Yechezkel, and he says, you see from Yechezkel that he couldn't go through water that was higher than his waist. So Abaye says, okay, but that's a Nachal, and Nachal implies it's rushing water. And then presumably Abaye is continuing. He says, Yachu Yavi Rena B'Sichui, and then you might say that he could pass through that water by swimming it or by floating through it. Talmud Lomar ki ga'u hamayim mei sachu.
Now it's explicit.
Now it's with the water. The water became great. Mei sachu, water of swimming, or the water of sachu. So he asks, "My mei sachu." What does mei sachu mean? Shiuta. That means shiuta. That's from the word lashut. It's the Aramaic form, right? From lashut, it's the noun form of lashut. It's shiuta. Shekain korim the shaita saicha. They call shaita saicha or siacha, which is what we would call schia. This is what it means. So what's his proof? So what is he bringing from? What's the proof that he's bringing? So this now this is where it gets even more interesting, because now he's quoting a pasuk not from Yechezkel, right? He's quoting this pasuk from Yeshayahu, and the 1 second. This is I have to tell you, I really not making excuses. I spent a lot of time on this, and I was really looking to see people who would explain this better. I only found one comment from the Maharsha, but what's the problem that bothered me? In other words, so Rav is saying, okay, the reason that Yechezkel couldn't go through the Nachal is because it was a Nachal, it was rushing water. Then you might say, okay, but maybe he could swim through it. And remember now, when we're talking about Yechezkel, the way Rav Yosef brings the psukim from Yechezkel, we're no longer talking about this question of Yom Kippur. We're talking about what is permitted for somebody to do to go through a body of water, just as a regular person on a regular weekday. So he's saying, so look, Rav Yosef says, look, you see, you're not allowed to go through a body of water if it's above your waist. And Abaye says, no, that's talking about rushing water. So rushing water above your waist, would presumably be too dangerous. You're not allowed to go through that. But maybe you'll say, all right, you're not allowed to walk through it, but maybe you would be allowed to swim through it. So he says, but I have this pasuk in Yeshayahu that seems to say no. So what's this pasuk in Yeshayahu? Pasuk in Yeshayahu, this is the pasuk. We have to give it a little bit of context, which I'll do in a second. But the pasuk is Ki. So it's Yeshayahu Lamed Gimel pasuk Kafal. Ki im sham adir Hashem lanu, mekom naharim yorim rachavei yadayim, bal telech bo ani shayit v'tzi adir lo yavrenu. Oh, wait a second. Did I get it out of? I think I got something out of order. 1 second. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I skipped ahead. I apologize. I skipped to the pasuk we haven't come to yet. I'm sorry, we're still in Yechezkel. Ki ga'u hamayim meisachu. Forget half of what I said. You'll figure out which half in a second. I was not as tired as Michael, but I told you I'm ready to go to sleep again. It's not good. Yeah, okay. This is where we got up to from Rav Yosef. Yoma erev nachal asher lo uchal la'avor ki ga'u hamayim meisachu nachal asher lo ye'aver. We got up to this water of sachu, a nachal that cannot be passed. So what is meisachu? So the way the English translation does it, he says the waters had risen, waters to swim in, a river that could not be passed through. So Gemara says, what is sachu? So sachu, they say, is shaita, and it means, like I say, either means to swim, or it would mean to sort of float through. So you could translate that as swimming waters. It's similar in the Targum. Mushach alfa nachla, mushach alfa nacha delo yechelet lame'abar. And he measured 1,000. It was a nachal that lo yechelet, that I could not pass through. Are takifu maya me sachava. Because the waters were great, they were me sachava. Nachalad lo shali tabar. It was a nachal that could not be passed through. So, okay. So Abai is saying my mesachu. So what does it mean that these were waters mesachu? It's shiuta. They're waters of shiuta, which are in Aramaic. They would call. In other words, the words are interchangeable. So let's understand it to keep it relatively simple. He's saying from this hemshech of the pasuk in Yechezkel, what's happening once the waters become a nachal. Now, presumably, based on the context, they are higher than his waist, and B, they're a nachal. And he's already explained that a nachal means that it's rushing water. So you might think, okay, it's rushing water, but he could still have passed through it because he could have swam, or he could have floated. But the pasuk says, no, I couldn't go, they were impassable waters. So here, the way I understand it, the Gemara here, it's not telling me now, it's no longer talking about the Isur, the Heter part, it's trying to give us pshat in Yechezkel. What does it mean that when Yechezkel said that he couldn't pass through it? It meant that he could not even swim through it. That's what he means. Swimming, in terms of the Isur v'Heter, so that's why I show you in Beitzah, you're not allowed to swim on Shabbos or Yom Tov, and that would also include Yom Kippur. So, just to keep that in mind, that when we're talking about going through water, even though we do understand that in the end, halachically, you'll be allowed to walk through water up to your neck, but in any event, you're not allowed to swim. Here, it's a different question. Here it's saying, what were the physical possibilities for Yechezkel? And he's saying you couldn't even swim. Maybe though maybe he could have traversed them. Maybe he could have gone through these waters in a small boat.
Shel, can you switch again?
Oh. Wait a second. No, wrong one. Oh, no, that's the right one. This is you see the Gemara, right?
I still see a Cheskel.
Oh, you still, oh, okay, it didn't switch. Now? Okay. Could be that he could pass through, or so we're now again, we're still talking about Yechezkel. Okay, so he couldn't walk through these waters. He couldn't swim through these waters. Maybe he could have traversed them in a small boat. Talmud Lomar Bal Telech Bo Ani Shait. You could not pass. You could not go through it in a floating ship. Ani like oniya. And shayit from this word shayit, right? To float or to traverse in the water. So the lead up I started to give you a few minutes ago was for this pasuk. Abaye is switching from the psukim in Yechezkel, either it's Abaye or it's the Stam Gemara, it's switching from the psukim in Yechezkel to this pasuk in Yeshayahu, which we'll look at in a moment. And this is bizarre. This to me is a little bit bizarre because what Yeshayahu is talking about is not immediate. We would not necessarily immediately link that to what Yechezkel was talking about. It seems to be brought from a completely different context. But for the moment, just to make a reading in the Gemara, let's just read it in place, and then we'll see if we can put it together. So again, we have this idea from Yechezkel, we have these waters that start off at a trickle, and then they get deeper, and then they get deeper, and then they get so deep that he can no longer walk through them. He can't even swim through them. And maybe you would think that he could sail through them on a boat, but I have a pasuk says that they can't go through it. A boat cannot go through it. Maybe he could go through it in a big ship, not just a little boat. Talmud Lomar v'tzi adir lo yavrenu. That's the continuation of this pasuk in Yeshayahu. You can't go through it even in a big boat. My mashma, what does this teach us, or what's this implying? Rav Yosef, it's the way Rav Yosef translated that verse in Yeshayahu, lo tazil be b'sfinat sayadin. You cannot go through it in a hunter's boat. Uborni rabati lo tegozenu. And you cannot go through it in a large borni, which was a kind of ship, a masted ship. Anyway, I'm probably spending too much time on this, but I mean, for the purposes of the shir, because I feel like I haven't come to a hard, fast conclusion about it, but I'll show you a couple of things. Let's take a second and look at the pasuk in Yeshayahu that he's talking about. The whole context of the pasuk in Yeshayahu here in Perek Lamed Gimel, this is it's mainly focusing on a vision, on a nevuah of Yeshayahu regarding Ashur and Sancheriv, right? So if you remember, Sancheriv comes down from the north and he conquers the north, and that's where the 10 tribes get scattered, and then he comes to conquer Yehuda, and Yechezkel davens that they should be saved, and then on the eve of the attack, some kind of a plague goes through the encampment of Sancheriv. Many soldiers die, and the rest of them flee. So, like mamash, on the eve of getting wiped out and getting certainly conquered, Yechezkel and the Bnei Yehuda are saved. And the vision here, it starts off by talking about, it's like Yeshayahu talking about Sancheriv. He says, Hoi shoded v'ata lo shadu. He says, woe, you robber, and you were not robbed. Boged v'lo bagdu bo. You were treacherous, and nobody was treacherous to you, etc. This is understood to be against Sancheriv. At some point, there's this vision here. Listen, those who are far away, that which I did, and know those who are close, my strength. Fear, those who sinned, right, are fearful in Zion, and people who also chanefim, other types of sinners, were gripped by fear. Who will dwell with us, or give us to dwell in a consuming fire? Who among us shall dwell with the devouring fire? Who among us shall dwell with everlasting burnings? So who can live? It would be people who, he that walks righteously and speaks uprightly, he that despises the gain of oppression, that shakes his hands from holding of bribes, that stops his ears from hearing of blood, and shuts his eyes from looking upon evil. He shall dwell on high. That's the person who can dwell on high. His place of defense shall be the munitions of rocks. His bread shall be given. His water shall be sure. In other words, if you're a choteh, you'll be afraid. If you're not a choteh, right, if you're a good person, if you're an upright person, then you will have refuge. Your eyes shall see, right? Melech v'yafyo techazena einecha tirena eretz marchakim. This pasuk we already quoted earlier in Yoma, if you remember. Do you remember the context? Your eyes shall see the king in his beauty.
Was it that he was allowed to wash, to be clean, because it's for the kavod of the melech?
Exactly. And here the reference to Melech is really a reference to Chizkiyahu, who was the king. This is a simple understanding that you will see the king in his beauty. They shall behold the land now. Eretz, right? Tirena eretz marchakim. Behold, they shall behold a land stretching afar. Your heart shall muse on the terror. Where is he that counted? Where is he that weighed? Where is he that counted the towers? What is that talking about? The Malbim explains, he says, you'll be very afraid of Sancheriv, because they will say in your heart, where is the one who counts? The sofer and the one who weighs and the one who counts the migdalim, these would be people that the king would need to prepare for battle, essentially. So you'll be looking, like you as an observer, you'll be looking at Chizkiyahu, and you're thinking, like, where are all the people he needs to go up in battle against Sancheriv? Et am noaz lo tireh, Imke safa yishma nil'ag lashon ein bina. You shall not see a fierce people. The different perushim here, Noaz could be like that. Noaz, like from Az, like from fearsome. Rashi says it means like foreigners. He says it's like loes. It doesn't matter, but you shall not see the fierce people, people of deep speech that you cannot perceive, of a stammering tongue you cannot understand. Chazet Sion, look upon Zion, the city of our solemn gatherings. Chazet Sion Kiryat Moadenu, they translate as solemn gatherings, like the Moed, like the place of our gatherings for Chagim and so forth. And Nechat Tirenu Yerushalayim, your eyes will see Yerushalayim, Naveh Sha'anan, a place of peaceful habitation. Ohel Bal Yitzan Bal Yisai Yitelotav Lanetzach, a tent that shall not be removed, whose stake shall never be plucked up, and none of its cords be broken. In other words, this is a very poetic way of saying that Yerushalayim will stand. Yerushalayim is solid; it will stand. Ki im sham adir Hashem, but there, because Hashem, adir Hashem, there Hashem will be with us in majesty. Mikom naharim yaorim rachavei yadayim. It's a place of broad rivers and streams. Bal telech vo ani shait. A place, right, which no galley with oars. That's the way they translate ani shait. And a shut in like modern Hebrew means an oar, and it's based on this idea that you use it for rowing through the water. But it means this place, we're talking about Yerushalayim, which is this place where Hashem dwells in majesty. It says it's a place of broad rivers and streams in which no galley with oars shall go. Bitzi adir lo ya'avrenu, and a gallant ship. The idea is that it's also would be like a much larger ship cannot pass through it. Ki Hashem shofteinu, Hashem b'chokekenu, Hashem malkeinu hu yoshiyenu. God is our judge, God is our lawgiver, God is our king, he will save us. Nichu chavalayich, bal yichazku ken tarnam bal parsu neis, az chulak ad shalam arbeh pisrin bazizu baz. Your ropes are loosened, they do not hold the stand of their mast, they do not spread the sail, then the prey of a great spoil will be divided, the lame will take the prey. So the basic idea of the vision is Chizkiah as the king who is Ne'aman to Hashem, who is a tzaddik. Hashem is going to protect him. And the poetic description is that Yerushalayim is this place that's surrounded by huge waters that even great, like small or great ships cannot pass through. But we understand it in context, it's a metaphor. It means that Yerushalayim is guarded by God from being assailed. So this is in a sense, it's even od yoter, like Yechezkel had this vision of waters coming out of the Beit HaMikdash. And there is, in fact, an idea that Latid Lavo, that there is actual water that's going to come out from the Beit HaMikdash. And here, you wouldn't necessarily make the connection to this pasuk in Yeshayahu, because here I could just say that the whole idea of waters surrounding surrounding Sion, surrounding Yerushalayim, is entirely metaphorical. It's not meant to be taken in a kind of a literal sense, even as something happening in the future. If you see what I mean. But I understand Abaye now is making this connection. And you could also, will say, it seems that the way I would understand it, or where the Stam Gemara there is understanding it, is that once I start talking about water around Yerushalayim, like Nachalim, rivers or bodies of water around Yerushalayim, presumably they must be the same, right? They must be the same thing in some sense. And so the waters that Yechezkel were talking about, maybe those are also the same waters that Yeshayahu was talking about. And so even though Yechezkel is talking about waters that he doesn't really see, he sees them in a vision, and maybe they allude to a vision that will happen sometime in the future. And here, arguably, the waters that Yeshayahu are talking about are these metaphorical waters that are here now in the time of Chizkiyahu. But maybe the reason he uses this metaphor of water is because the Nevi'im understood that ultimately there's going to be this water that will come out of the Beit HaMikdash, and it's going to end up being very tall, and it's going to surround Yerushalayim. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure. This is the best I could do to put this together, because otherwise it's just psukim that say, oh, you can't pass through this with a ship. Avamazikashur. Like, so how is it relevant? So the only way I can say it's relevant is if Abai is saying that the waters that Yeshayahu are talking about are ultimately the same water, it's the same concept of water that Yechezkel is talking about. And these waters, let's go back to the Gemara, 1 second. I'm glad to see you smiling.
It's all kind of diffuse. It's like it's not clear how it follows. It's like you said, it's like just pesukim, but you could pull many pesukim about waters and ships and.
Yeah, so it seems to me here, and I'm not a makubal, but it seems to me that there is some mystical aspect to what's going on here. What I mean by mystical is that it seems to be alluding to things on different levels. Because here, once again, to root ourselves, what we were really concerned with to begin with is just, am I allowed to go through water on Yom Kippur? That was our concern. But if Yosef comes on and says, look, you're not allowed to go through water even on Chol if it's above your waist. But he says, no, that's only talking about rushing water. If it's rushing water, then yes, then you're not allowed to go above your waist. And but it's like, now that I'm talking about those psukim from Yechezkel, let's examine them a little bit further. In Yechezkel, it says that the waters got so high, ki ga'u hamayim mesahu. So that it sounds like they got as high that you would go to swim through them, but then the hemshech of that pasuk is mesahu. It says, it says nachal sher lo ya'aver. It's a nachal that you can't go through. In other words, it was let's say waters to swim, but it means that they would be too hard for you to swim through. So he says, maybe those waters that Yechezkel is imagining, or I shouldn't say imagining, that he is having a vision of, but maybe he could have traversed them in a small boat. But I have this vision, or I have this nevuah of Yeshayahu, which it seems to me he's talking about the same waters. Why are they the same waters? Because they would be waters that are surrounding Jerusalem. And those waters, he says, Bal telech bo ani shayit. You can't go through them with a small boat, or let's say maybe a boat that you row with oars. But maybe you could go through with a large ship. Maybe you could get right. So, but then the hemshech of the pasuk is Tzia lo yadren, and you can't go through with Tzia. When the Gemara says my mashma, what does it mean? I think they're bothered by this word "see." This word "see" is not clear, and that's why the Gemara says it's the way Rav Yosef translated, and he translated "see" to be "borni rabati," which would be like a large ship. Okay. So what do we get out of all of this? That there is this idea that Yerushalayim, as it were, is, if I were to put it in context of Yeshayahu, because of Chizkiyahu, who was a tzaddik, Hashem is going to protect Yerushalayim, and it's as if Yerushalayim is surrounded by great waters that no people can't pass through, and even a great ship would not be able to pass through these waters. So it means it's a stronghold. Yerushalayim is a stronghold. The only other thing I'll show you, and I'll see if I can explain this well. The only person I saw who talked about it outright, 1 second, is the Maharsha. And I'm not 100% sure if I can explain it well, explain what the Maharsha is saying, but I will do my best. So 2 comments from the Maharsha. So this is the Maharsha on our Gemara, right, on Daf Ayin Zayin Amud. From here on, I couldn't go through. So this is talking about the pasuk in Yechezkel. Midaloni tan shiulo tan ha'elef, kamosh nitan ha'alafim shnamru kvar. So this is the way we understood the Gemara, since when he comes to the pasuk where he says, I couldn't go through, that's the 4,000th. He says, I can't go through. And so he says, since it doesn't give a measure to this last 1,000 amot of water, meaning it doesn't measure him against his body the way it did before, right? First, because it was ankles, knees, and then waist. And here it doesn't say anything about the measure of his body. So it implies that anything above the waist is water that he couldn't go through. And that's the way we learned the Gemara also. But as we say, Baruch Shekivantu, that this is how the Maharsha understood it. Then he gets to this pasuk from Yeshayahu, Yaviren v'chulei. It could be that you could go through with a boat. Talmud Lamar Baltalech Bo Anishai. You can't go through with a small boat. So the Maharsha says Hanach Krai de Lael b'Yechezkel name. The earlier psukim are from Yechezkel. The high Krai b'Yeshaya Ktiv. But this pasuk is from Yeshaya. Below the mashmalei b'hanach maya the mishtai be'krad Yechezkel, mishtai be'nami krad Yeshayahu. So he says it doesn't mean that the waters that Yechezkel is talking about are the same waters that Yeshayahu is talking about. The hainu b'mayim dilatich yotzimi beit kodesh kadashim. The water in Yechezkel is this water that in the future is going to come out from the Kodesh Kodeshim, Kinufurasha Kaman, as it's going to be explained explicitly later. That's a little bit, we're going to continue in this thing with the water. If you read ahead, Gemara is still going to talk about this. Mihu b'Yechezkel mashma sheyuhu safa v'nachal. In Yechezkel, there's an implication that there are banks to the river that he's talking about. He doesn't say explicitly, but there's an indication because of the way Yechezkel describes it. that 1,000 amot of water comes out. So if it's 1,000 amot, let's say lengthwise, it means it has a specific width. So there must be some kind of banks to it. There has to be some kind of banks to this river. Achar ha'elef ha'revi'i, mashma sheyu safan l'nachal hazeh, achar ha'elef ha'revi'i, after the 4,000th amma of Yeshayahu Furash, and whereas in Yeshayahu it says Vitzi Adir Lo Yavrenim, even a great ship cannot pass through it. Dahainu Beborni Gadola, or it's talking about a very large ship. V'anan Chazinan Deborni Gdola Over Binyam Kama Alafim Parsaot. We see that a large borni, a large ship, goes through the sea, even thousands of miles. We have Shami Shum to Redife Maya. It could be that the reason it can't pass through there in the vision of Yeshayahu is maybe also Mishum to Redife Maya, because the water is rushing. Because the water is rushing so much. So like we say earlier. So it's the Marsha is sensitive to this issue that the Pasuk of Yeshayahu doesn't seem to be exactly the same thing that Yechezkel is talking about. And how can you, he says, because and one of the things he points out, which we didn't say, but points out, in the vision of Yechezkel, the water must have been limited. It would have had banks. We don't know how wide it was, but it would have had a specific width coming out. And now, the water that the way Yeshayahu describes it is this water that even a huge ship can't go through. So how does that make sense if we're talking about a water of limited width? So it seems what he's saying is that it could be even if there's a limited width to the Nachal of Yechezkel, but if the water is so turbulent, even a great ship might not be able to pass through it. But he doesn't really address head on this question that I'm asking, which is, how do these visions line up? Like, how is it that the vision of Yeshayahu, how are we to understand the way it links up with the vision of Yechezkel? Because yes, I mean, he indicates there's a question, because it sounds like the water of Yeshayahu doesn't have any limits. And that's why even a big ship can't go through them. He says, well, maybe it's limited, but still the ship might not be able to go through a very rocky, turbulent river. I didn't know what else to say about it, because I don't know enough to say anymore. It does seem to me, though, as I say, I'll just maybe wrap up with this, that the way the Gemara understands, the waters of Yeshayahu are similar to this, are either the same or similar to the waters that is described in Yechezkel. So the way we understood the waters in Yeshayahu is that ultimately there's a vision that waters are going to surround Jerusalem as a protection of Jerusalem. And maybe that also coincides with the vision of the water coming from the Beit HaMikdash that Yechezkel describes. Maybe they're also somehow protected. As I said, when we looked at Yechezkel, we don't understand when we read Yechezkel's Stam what the significance of those waters are. It's only when we look in Yeshayahu, we understand that they have some kind of, the waters of Yeshayahu are some kind of a protective water. And here it's not clear. So next week we're going to continue in this, and we'll look also at the pasuk in Zechariah, where it talks about water coming out of the Beit HaMikdash. We'll see if maybe we can bring this a little bit closer together, but I think this is a good place to stop.
but doesn't it prove a bias point that it's not necessarily the depth of the water, but the turbulence? So when Rav Yosef says, can you really cross? It's not an issue of whether it's up to your neck or more, but it's really that it's so turbulent, because if a big boat can't cross, well, certainly that a person can't cross.
Very good. So yeah, in terms of the halachic implication, then yes, that if we're talking about the same water, right? So it's meisachel shelo lo ya'aver. It's not just that Yechezkel couldn't pass through it, but even a boat, a small or even a large boat, can't pass through it. Yeah, yesh lomar. So yeah, look, in terms of halacha, I think we saw it when we looked in the Orach Chaim, right? You're not allowed to go through rushing water like that to pass through. We'll look back at the halachic implication a little, maybe when we finish this next part of the sugya. But yeah, yesh lomar. But I think the hamshech of the sugya that we're looking at today, it's no longer really concerned
Yeah.
with the halacha.
Yeah.
It's trying to pull together these visions of water and Jerusalem, which, you know, you lived in Jerusalem. It's one of the interesting things about Jerusalem, right? It's on a mountain, it's elevated. We're not surrounded by water.
Yeah.
As ma kol haketa, like what's this idea? What is the idea of water coming out of the temple? And then what's this idea of saying that Yerushalayim is surrounded by water? Is there something more to it than just a metaphor? Anyway, that's the best I can do,
Okay.
at least for now. Okay, so Bezrat Hashem, I'll see you next week.
All right. Thank you very much. Good night or
Thank
good afternoon.